Okay, good morning, everyone. This is Katerina. Welcome to my podcast, Minecraft Peace. And it's my great pleasure to welcome Jacqui Ellis as my guest today on this glorious autumnly Monday. How are you today, Jacqui? Great to have you.
Thank you, Katerina. And great to be here. I'm good, thank you. And I'm loving the autumn sunshine and the colours too. It's my favourite season.
Is it wonderful?
Mm.
It makes a difference, a bit of
Mm.
sunshine. So the reason I've invited Jacqui today, because I'm very intrigued and curious about her work. I love what she does. That we've got many points where our work kind of meets. We're both very much passionate about bringing the potential through to the young people that we work with and their families. So I will just take a moment to introduce Jacqui. From my notes, I had to bring notes, and then we'll go from there. So Jacqui is a biodynamic craniosacral therapist. She's also a neurodevelopmental therapist, and I had the pleasure to meet Jacqui several years ago now, and we've become friends, and we both love doTERRA essential oils. We both support people with the wonderful oils that they make, and I was really drawn to Jacqui's work because through my own journey, I kind of understood the importance of what happens to us whilst we're in the womb, and also how we experience coming into this world. So perhaps for those who don't know, would you explain what craniosacral therapy is? And if you want to talk a little bit more about your work in that respect, that would be amazing.
Okay, so yeah, craniosacral therapy is effectively working with the movement of the cerebral spinal fluid in the body,
Mhm.
and all the tissue fluids or intertissue fluids that surround all our cells. So I guess some people would describe it as an energy therapy. It was developed as a touch therapy.
Mhm.
In recent times, a lot of us have been working more from a distance perspective, to keep our practices going during the last 3 years. But it's about working with the body's own inherent treatment plan. So,
Mhm.
our systems want us to be well, and our energies can get stuck, the fluids can get stuck.
Mhm.
And basically, it's the acknowledgement of another person's presence, acknowledging the stuckness, that's very, very healing. So I'm effectively trained to listen with my hands, but I have listened with my whole body because I'm very somatic in the way that I track my clients. And I place hands on or focus attention on the part of their body that is coming through as being stuck or a little out of kilter. And obviously, the client may come in and say, oh, this is what's happening for me at the moment. And as I've developed my work, I found that I am more drawn and constantly tuning into the very early story of the client.
Mhm.
So they may come to me with, an ongoing hip joint issue, and they've had other, sort of modalities like chiropractic or osteopathy or things like this. And it's okay for a while, and then it comes back again. And as I tune into the body, I then get a picture, a visualization, and I feel it in my body of what happened to them during their birth, for example. So I'm going right back to the beginning. And craniosacral therapy works on the basis that we all come into life with a blueprint. So, it's our map of our body and our journey. And then as we come through womb and we go through our birthing process, and for some people, our conception as well can be a little tricky. As we come through these journeys, we are left with imprints. So, if I hold my hand up and then press my finger on it, there will be a spot that's left as a result of that. So that's what
Mhm.
I'm effectively saying as an imprint. And these are buried deep in our subconscious. So as we move through our lives and journey through our lives, our psyche's working really hard to bring these imprints into our focus. And so we can heal them, because once we see them, I often talk about, and you will relate to this, you know, it's like shining the light on the shadow that's within. And once we've shone the light on it, we know it, we can see it. It's, you know, completely different to not knowing it and therefore constantly wondering, oh, is it that? Is it this? Is it that? So that's the very healing process. And the fact that that is witnessed by, you know, a therapist like myself is really healing, because then the individual doesn't feel like they're on their own with it. So we can work with helping them to process it. So yeah, you know, I effectively work with pre and perinatal trauma. And, you know, birth is designed to be challenging, because that sets us up for life on Earth. You know, life here physically is challenging. And these patterns, these very early imprints, come forward when we're going through transition, which makes total sense, because that's when we're in stress or overwhelm. And therefore, the psyche's working really hard to bring these imprints out of our subconscious into our conscious memory, so that then we can actually understand them better. We can work with them. We can make different decisions, because when the imprint was formed, we may have been feeling really helpless. And obviously, a lot of this is happening, you know, outside of the consciousness and visibility of others, our mothers, our parents, because it's our internal journey inside our mum. So yeah, and then if we've had trauma, and that word is used a great deal today, so I just want to qualify that. You know, this is a situation or an experience that we found difficult as an individual to deal with. So trauma means different things to everybody, okay? What I find traumatic, you might find okay. But what you find traumatic, I also might find okay. So it's a very individual thing, and it's all about individual experience. It's about how that's held, that experience has been held within the environment. But, you know, situations that happen during conception, through our womb journey and our birth process, can also interfere with our primitive reflexes, and therefore our neurology and central nervous system. So the neurodevelopmental therapy works very well and dovetails very well with the craniosacral, because it's both working with the central nervous system. And we come into life with a set of reflexes that we call primitive reflexes, because they are very simple, but they're about keeping us alive in those first 6-9 months of life. Because, as you know, we are the most immature mammals to be born. You know, if you see a lamb or a calf birthed, you know, a few seconds, minutes, they get up and they're very shaky, but then they start walking. You know, we can't do that for at least 8-9 months. So we go through a developmental sequence of movement patterns in our very early life, where we are networking our central nervous system and networking these reflexes so that we can transform them into postural reflexes, which are the reflexes that then stay with us for the rest of our lives. So yeah, the two modalities work very well. I'm also trained in integrative baby therapy, which means that I recognize gestures and body language that are related to being in utero, and our baby body language. And we all have that. We carry that through into adulthood as well. And these movements and gestures can come forward again in times of stress. So I also listen as well to what I call womb statements. So clients are, you know, the intelligence is amazing. They will say something which will give me an indication that that's a very, very early statement, even though they're talking about a situation that's happening for them presently. You know, and it's things like, how long have you felt like that? Oh, I've always felt like it. I've always had anxiety. I don't understand it, but there's this underlying thing that I'm always with. Oh, okay, that's a womb statement. So I just hold that and I think, okay, now I'm curious, what happened there? Yeah, it's amazing. It's
No,
great.
it's
And my
fascinating.
key thing is curiosity. You know,
Yes.
I never know what my clients are bringing, really. You know, their bodies are talking to them and telling them what they need to bring. So my session work is very fluid. It goes with the flow of, you know, what's presenting. And the body intelligence is phenomenal. Yeah.
There's a couple of points you already mentioned that I was going to ask about. Well, maybe we'll come to that a little bit later. At this point, I just want to pick up on the name of your business, Deep Connections, because Connections is part of my tagline as well. So one of the areas where we meet, because for me and you, I'm sure it's all about the deep connection to our inner selves, to our body, to who we really are. And once you are able to do that, make those connections or heal them in some way, then you can really live your life. You can thrive. You can reach the potential like we've talked about. And I find all of this area very, very fascinating. Like for most women, it came in as an interest, obviously, when I became pregnant myself. And just to give the context, I did a hypnobirthing course when I was pregnant, and pregnant 35 weeks, I decided to have a home birth, because through that process of learning about what labor and birthing actually is, I was like, there's no way I can give birth in this way to my baby in a hospital environment. So I already kind of recognized that, and I think it made a massive difference. So both of my boys were born at home. I'm sure they have their own trauma stories. There's no doubt about that. But just like you mentioned about the other mammals, you know, we're the only mammal that has kind of medicalized, you know, coming into the world. I'm not, you know, saying that help isn't needed when it's you know, question of life and death. Absolutely not. But it is a natural process where we actually connect with that mammal side of us to our very primitive side of us. And the body's kind of, if everything is running as it should, just take over and just drive the whole process itself. And we need to get out of the way. And that's what I found, like, for me, the most powerful experience of that was that, wow, there's this wild, you know, animal inside of me that is just doing this. Yeah, it was fascinating. So I recognized that very early on. And then there's one image that came to my mind, which is a picture of a woman with a fetus in its womb. And it was a quote about the fact that as a fetus, a female fetus, you already have all of the eggs there ready to then create, you know, life, another human being further down the line. So the connection also goes for our ancestral lines. So I, for example, feel very connected to my grandmother.
Yes.
Because, and that's another point to why I wanted to came, is that what we go through and part of our story is also what was going on for our mother and our grandmother. So from your experience, from the way you you know, have been supporting clients, how do you see that manifest, to give people also an idea of how how it works?
Yeah. No, sure. Can I just come back about birthing?
Yeah.
And what you said? Yeah, we have seriously medicalized it in Western society. And, you know, there is an element of fear around that process, which should be natural. You know, I totally accept. I mean, I had all three of mine in hospital. I wasn't so involved in this work at that time, so I followed guidelines. I think what I've learned from that is that, you know, lots of people feel safer having their baby in hospital, and that's absolutely fine. My issue about the whole thing is that there's no conversation with the little one.
Right.
Yeah. So it's about, you know, birth is a dance. You know, we're supposed to be working together in this process. And the difficulty is that when intervention comes in, that causes a separation. Yeah. Now, it may be that that intervention was absolutely necessary. You know, my daughter was born via ventouse. I'm a forceps baby. And if those procedures didn't happen, you know, neither of us might be here, or we might have been, you know, seriously traumatized or damaged in some other way, because we couldn't actually come through. So for me, that's okay, but it's the way that these interventions are given and a lack of consciousness amongst the people in that room, you know. So a lot of my conversations with mothers, you know, pregnant mothers, are around, you know, place your hands on your belly, connect with your baby and tell your baby what's going to happen. So your baby is not in a state of shock. Yeah. And obviously mum can only do that if she's feeling held safely within the environment that she's in. So that calls on the support of the doula, if they're there, the midwives, a partner, you know, or whoever is birthing on the birthing journey with her. So these people all need to be grounded as well. So it's about an education there. So that's what I'm really passionate about, you know, because in the Western world, when we ask about the birth experience, it's all the mother's experience. And you have a birth experience, I have a birth experience, I have the birthing experience of my 3 children, but they have a very different experience that is their own of that process that they went through. And therefore, I'm really about championing the story of the little one. And it's the unknown story. You know, so just to say that, I mean, you know, babies that are breech can turn if there's a conversation. So it's all about having a higher level of consciousness about this. And I will want to take that right back to conception. You know, let's consciously conceive. Let's be conscious during the pregnancy and let's have a conscious birth. And that would actually, gosh, create so many more good vibes out here. You know, without putting it very bluntly, you know, some feel that they have a sense of abuse. And that's due to their birthing process.
That's powerful.
You know, it might have been a survival issue, an emergency cesarean, things had to happen very quickly. But, you know, if mums understand, I need to talk to my baby, they can be doing that whilst they're being prepped or whatever. You know, we just need to understand how to hold the space differently.
And I think that also needs an awareness and the recognition that this is a human being already. It's not just a fetus, you know. So that requires that kind of level of awareness to start with.
It does. And, you know, and I say to a lot of people, and Jaap van der Waal, who's an eminent embryologist, you know, the womb journey is a lifetime. We spend a lifetime in womb. We then transform, go through a process like the butterfly in the chrysalis, coming out, the wings, you know, that is birth. We start another part of our journey as soon as we're born, you know, and then moving on, we transition again, and this is my real deep belief, into another phase as we die. That is a birthing process into the next stage of our life. Yeah. I can go back into womb and understand my womb journey. We don't have the ability, not that I'm aware of yet, other than people that have near-death experiences, you know, to consciously come back and go, oh, well, that's what I did there. You know, we only know that when we cross over there. We only know life here on Earth as we cross through the pelvis. So there's a lot of synchronicity there for me, in the way that is. So, yeah. And I've gone completely off track now, Katerina.
That's okay.
So
I will come back to it. I've remembered. I was just trying to remember
you
what
were
I asked
talking
you. It
about
was the
us ancestors, weren't you?
so yeah, the experience of our mothers, grandmothers on us as you know, as we're in the womb, and how it then impacts us in life.
Yeah. So I have worked with people whose parents have been involved in war, or grandparents have been involved in war. And they have visions. They will describe a scene. They may be able to smell something, and it's like, this is nothing to do with me. I don't understand what it is. But they are bringing forward the experience of their grandparent in that time. A lot of the children that I work with, and this is why I'm just very humbled, and they're just phenomenal, you know, will come in to session work and will bring, you know, their grandparents' story or their great grandparents' story. You know, and I talk a lot about, you know, we all, it's almost like we all have an emotional rucksack that we're carrying around on our backs that we don't really see. It's behind us, we don't understand it. And it's full of these, what I say as rocks, you know, stuckness, that needs to be seen. And this bag gets carried and passed down to the next generation, the next generation, the next generation, until this is seen. And sometimes the little one's behavior can be about trying to bring that into light. But because they don't understand it, they can only behave. So really interesting case study story, working with a little 5-year-old who I thought he was going through his birth process. He was sat on his mum's lap, holding space, and he was getting very, you know, aggressive towards her, you know, punching her and stuff. So I just said, oh, okay, you know, this is a bit tricky. And mum was, you know, sort of trying to defend. So I put a cushion, I attempted to put a cushion between them so he could punch the cushion, because there was obviously something that he wanted to express. And I just looked at her and I said, does this happen often? And she went, yeah. I went, oh, okay. He immediately took the cushion and said, no, 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 not there, and put it in front of him. And then he said, I need another one here and another one here. So we made a container for him. That's what he asked for. And then he just sat there for a moment and he just went, I need one on top. So I put a cushion over the top. So he's effectively sitting in this little box, this cushion box on his mum's lap. And he went, I can still see. There mustn't be any holes. There mustn't be any holes. So then I got a scarf and put over the top of the whole thing. And it's a like voile scarf. So, you know, it would still let some light in. It wasn't completely shut in the dark. And he just sat there. And it all went very, very still. The whole room just like dropped energetically. And then he went, gotta get out now, gotta get out now. You know, pushed through everything and then actually came down his mum's legs. And I helped him to do that. And I thought, oh, okay, that's interesting, because that's not what I understood of his birth process. So I asked mum, I said, you know, is that how he came forward? And she went, no. Okay. So I thought, okay, we just need to be curious about that. He got in the car and he was very quiet. And then he, on the journey home, said, Spitfire, Spitfire, mummy. So just to bring the story in, because obviously I could talk about a lot more, what he was bringing forward was I think, if I'm right in saying it's his great-great-grandfather, who was actually lost in World War II, I think, where the plane went down in the English Channel. He went on a mission. They were told it was probably a mission that many of them wouldn't come back from, to fly across into Europe. And this guy didn't make it home. Now, he had married his fiancée. You know, he was engaged, and she was pregnant at this time. She didn't know it. So huge amounts of shame for the family. You know, one, you know, a soldier, a fighter pilot lost at sea, no body, no, you know, process to grieve and bury. And then, you know, a lady who is pregnant outside of wedlock. So she was posthumously married, excuse me, and gave birth to a son.
Wow.
And he grew up thinking this guy was his father. And you know, and that's the story in the family. But I think he went on to suffer an illness. Because, you know, for me, energetically, he was holding a huge thing, you know, that he couldn't express. So, you know, my client's mum, you know, messaged me and said, goodness me, this has opened up a huge can of worms for the family. Because obviously when I got home, I was just like, what is this all about? And he went home twice after session saying Spitfire, Spitfire. So she's like, how does he know this? Because we've never, you know, I've never talked about it. Has Dad talked about it? No, we've not been to the Air Museum or anything. So she brought up a picture of lots of aeroplanes from that period and just went, that's the one. That's it. That's it. So she obviously then talked more to his dad, her husband, and said, well, what is this about? And Dad just went, oh, no. You know, and this story then came into the light. And the boy, so the grandfather or the great-grandfather used to sleep in a room with an older guy. And he had sort of a bond and a friendship with him. And this older guy is still alive. So the family contacted him and said, would it be possible to come and speak to you about this? So they all went as a family. And the gentleman was so excited. And Mum just said it was unbelievable. As they came into the room and they saw each other, there was just, you know, a sense of they know each other. So just really powerful, you know, and when we started work, I had no idea. She came because he was getting more demonstrative about his behavior, more defiant, lots of sibling rivalry going on. And, she, you know, she's just like, I don't understand why this is going on. And after those 2 sessions, he ate more than he'd ever eaten, ever. So it was like his whole system had settled because now this burden that he was carrying had been revealed. So, and I have lots of situations where, you know, even when I'm working on the therapy table, I might smell something or I might get a vision, and I'll say, okay, I'm just going to share something with you. You know, I'm seeing this or I'm smelling this. And the client will go, oh, yeah. And it brings something forward. You know, my grandma used to do this, or, you know, I've never smoked, but my granny smokes all the time, and things like this. And then, you know, maybe there was, you know, financial issues or something going on at that time, which obviously created stress and anxiety. So a sense of there's never enough. You know, I've done my own ancestral work because one of the things that I grew up with, I'm from farming stock, was that there is never enough. And food is really, really important. You know, I went into the hospitality industry at the beginning of my career, you know, was chefing and running restaurants and stuff. So I've always had this real thing about food, and I didn't really understand. And whenever, you know, anybody comes here, you know, and I'm cooking supper or, you know, entertaining, there's just masses because I just don't want anybody to go hungry, you know. And my kids always say, Mum, there's too much, you know, or blimey, those portion sizes. So I wanted to understand more about it. So I did some work with a lady called Mary Bolingbroke. I'm working with the ancestors. And I have an Irish connection back through my paternal line. And what came forward as I was doing my session work, I saw a little girl with lots of curly fair hairs in potato furrows. So she was in this real deep soil, bare feet, and she had her back to me. And I was just like, oh, gosh, okay, this is really interesting. And Mary, you know, was encouraging me to just keep a wide open space and work with my intuition. And she said, keep looking at her because she's got information for you. So I did that. And then she slowly turned round and she had her hands like this. And Mary saw it too. And it's just like, she's got a gift for you, Jacqui. What is it? Just wait. So she walked very slowly over the furrows and showed me what was in her hands. And it was soil.
Wow.
And that made me really, I just burst into tears. The emotion was massive. And I just went, oh gosh, what is that all about? And then working back through things, I came to understand that, yeah, there were ancestors of mine in Ireland during the potato famine.
That's the first thing that popped to my head.
Yeah, they had their land taken away. Everything was destroyed. All their crops were taken and brought to England. And there was nothing for them to eat. They were starving. And that energy has come down through. I mean, my body's reacting now as I'm talking.
Mine too.
Okay, so we're both noticing that there's a real cold shiver streaming down through my legs as I'm grounding more energy to do with that. So I understood my grandfather, my paternal grandfather's, you know, absolute relationship with the land and the passion that he had for the land. And, you know, which my father also had, my connection with countryside. And, you know, that's really brought me back to my roots, you know, because I moved away from agriculture and farming. You know, my father always called me a town girl because it was like I'd lost my roots. Yeah, so that was a very, very powerful thing, you know, to see. So we are amazing. And just to pick up on, you know, your eggs were inside your mum's fetus as she was, you know, percolating. I say percolating or marinating in her mum's body. But don't forget, your grandma's eggs were in her mum's body, which were also in her mum's body. So this is why we talk about 7 years to change. 7 generations, rather. 7 generations to transform transgenerational trauma, because you have those 6 generations that are very connected. So yeah, I mean, things like that just fascinate me.
Absolutely. And you think that a lot of us right now are doing this work, healing. So let's be kind to ourselves. We've got a lot to deal with. Yeah.
No, there are a lot of us that have come in to cut the cords for this time. You know, and I work with a lot of what I call new children, new generation children who are coming in, who want to, you know, they're seeing the earth and life here differently to their parents. So that's quite tricky. So, you know, parents parenting from that old perspective, and Little's come in going, no, I need this, or I need to do it like that. And it's like, well, no, you can't. You've got to do it like this, because there's a stuckness there between them. So a lot of my work is about enabling that to become more gelled and together. So there's a deeper understanding.
I feel the same way in the fact that the children these days are different. They're very differently connected to the earth, and that they have actually come in to help the parents to do this healing work, because like you said, they shine a light on something sticky, uncomfortable, you know. It can be belief patterns, can be trauma. It doesn't really matter. But in my work, I see that from where I'm looking at it, they're very, very sensitive, very tuned into the earth, and you know, probably other realms as well, depends on the child, but they really don't worry in the same way that we would. If they are, then they've probably absorbed what is going on in their environment, what's going on. It's not theirs. That's what I mean. So you and I, and I don't know if you agree with me, I my kind of, if you like, mission. I don't like that word. It's a bit big, but let's use it just
Yes.
for the sake of this interview, is to really help the kids and create the environment so they really can bring in a different world. You know, we are surrounded by conflicts in the world right now, and so much has been revealed to us about, you know, what we're living in, that these children are here for the next phase. They are here to already live in, you know, the better world that we all want, but we're in like that birth canal right now, aren't we?
Absolutely. And I referred to that so much during the last 3-4 years.
Yeah.
You know, it's like we are in a huge transition right now. You know, and a lot of the younger generation have come in with a different view, like you're saying.
Yeah.
An orientation. We have such a massive opportunity to change the way we do things. You know, and you and I have had other conversations about the healthcare system, you know, schooling and education. You know, there's a real opportunity at the moment for us all to understand, what is it that we want, what's going to work, how do we want to see that, and therefore how are we going to create it, because we need to create it from the ground as well. And all these, I mean, you know, my kids are 20 plus, you know, but to see their energies and their orientation to the world and what they're saying and what they would like to see, you know, and every generation, new generation comes in with this momentum, because that's what they're about. You know, teenagers are all about challenging, you know, the paradigms and shifting the boundaries and the lines and everything. You know, and I think it would be great if we just, I don't know, embrace that energy more, because there's so much creativity there, you know. And like you're saying, you know, when we all feel safe, we can be in our creativity. But if we're not safe and we're in survival mode, we don't move anything forward. We get very, very stuck, you know. So as your work is, my work is about creating that safe environment for the parent to be able to parent from a much more conscious perspective, from their heart space, you know, a serious amount of compassion in there. And, you know, we're all extremely busy. And I'm not sitting here saying it's simple. I got so many things wrong. You know, my kids and I talk about it all the time. You know, but it's to be able to be with that learning is what's really positive. You know, I say to lots of people, we come here to learn. And for me, that's the crime. If we don't do the learning, that's not good, because we don't move anything forward.
That brings me nicely to my next question, which was to ask you about your children, because you talk about, I'll share your links at the end of the interview, but I recommend you see Jacqui's website, about how, of all the professionals that you've worked with, it was your children, actually, your 3 children, that have been and continue to be, from what I hear, your greatest teachers. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I have 3. Our daughter's 24. Our next child, Tom, is 22, and then our youngest is 20. So Meg was at school. She went through all her developmental milestones, you know, there or thereabouts, and, you know, was a talker, a bit like me. So she's, you know, in school, quite lively, you know, friendly and everything, but the whole writing thing was really quite tough for her, and reading, that was not happening. So and I was sort of aware of it, but I thought, oh well, you know, everybody develops at their own rate and it's fine, and I know that she can communicate, so it's okay. But we got to year 2, end of Key Stage 1, parent evening, and or meeting, and it's always a bit, you know, sort of like, oh, I wonder what they're going to say on, isn't it, when we're parents going into school to hear about our children's progress. So Dad and I sat down, and the teacher, who was, you know, a very experienced teacher, and I was assisting in school at this time as well, he just sat there and he just went, he said, yeah, Meg's really interesting, isn't she? So immediately I'm going, oh gosh, what does that mean? And he said, she knows how to survive. She's got the world all figured out. So I thought, right, okay, do I take that as a positive, or do I sit here and go, ooh? And then he went to say, I want to say, so she's great at copying. She knows how to cheat. She knows who's the kid in the class that's great at doing something, so she'll sit next to them. If she can't do anything, she's great at distracting everybody else. You know, she'll make a joke or whatever. She's always the first person to put her hand up, you know, to go and do one of the jobs. So she's really willing. But obviously what that does is it gets her out of the situation. So I just sat there and went, oh, right, well, that wasn't exactly what I was expecting you to say. So, and then it just came to light, yes, she's got through her SATs and she's achieved her level, you know, she's very eloquent. She'll tell you exactly. I know whenever you've been to some sort of historical museum, or, you know, take the example, you know, we've just finished doing the Egyptians. I know you went to the British Museum in London and she saw the Tutankhamun exhibition, and she came into class and she just talked through how you mummify a cat. So it's not that it's not going in, you know, she's very observant and whatever, but what we can't get is that in there onto a piece of paper. Or, you know, reading is so I was like, oh gosh, okay. So it's like, well, she's achieved her SATs, we'll carry on. So we went through year 3, and then at the end of year 3, the teacher comes out to me and says, Jacqui, do you think you could work on number bonds 1 to 20 with Meg over the summer holidays? So I just stood there and I went, what? Oh, don't worry, she's not the only one that doesn't, you know, isn't fluent with that. I said, but that's not my issue. What you're saying is our daughter isn't fluent with that, and she should have got that under her belt by the end of year 1. And here we are 2 years later, and you're telling me she doesn't get it. So long story short, I thought, right, I'm going to do some work over the summer holidays. So we would sit down. I think it lasted a couple of weeks. You know, for 15 minutes a day. And I say, right, okay, Meg, we're going to do number bonds 1 to 20. And because I was working in the school, I had lots of creative ways of helping children, because I would work with other children to do this in the classroom. And every morning we sat down, it's like, right, okay, let's recall what we did yesterday. So I got really frustrated, because I'm just like, I know that you're not stupid. I know that you can talk about all these things that are interesting to you, but I don't understand why you can't get this. You know, if I say 7 to you, you can't say 13. Or even if we're doing number bonds to 10, you can't say 3. And we've got matchsticks on the table, we've got dice, all these things, and you can't do it. So I got really frustrated and understood that actually this was going to really impact our relationship, because I was losing patience, she was feeling dreadful. So I decided to go to the doctor, and basically the doctor said, oh, I think you need to, you know, go and get her assessed for dyslexia. So I thought, okay, what does that mean? Well, you go and you get the assessment, you pay a large amount of money, and then you have to take it back into school. And I'd already had conversations with the head teacher at the school saying, well, you know, she's not doing that great, blah, blah. And, you know, the head just said, well, you know, we can make sure that she's sat on the SENS table, but she's not bad enough to want to, you know, she needs support, but I don't have the finances. She needs to be a lot worse before I can actually go and ask for finances to support her. So I'm just like, what? This is ridiculous. In the meantime, I'm seeing our daughter's self-esteem doing that. And, you know, she's falling further and further behind. So I just thought, well, there's no point in going to the Dyslexic Association and paying all that money, because nothing's going to happen with that. I've got to do a different thing. So that's when I understood that movement is really important. You know, and as I said at the beginning, if we don't go through Nature's Gym program and do enough of specific movements in a developmental sequence, we will not network those primitive reflexes. So, and then I reflected in on Meg's birth process and how that was, her pregnancy inside me. And it's like, well, there are enough factors here to hold her up. So that's when I went on a journey to learn about the movement, the developmental movement program. So I went and got trained. And the head teacher came to me and said, we know there are lots of children that are very similar to Meg in this school. So I would like you to run a program for children. So I worked in school for 4.5 years running a developmental movement program where
Wow.
children would come to me for 15-20 minutes at the start of their day, do very specific exercises, and then off they go into their lessons. Now, lots of people at that time were doing things like wake and shake in the playground. You know, brain gym was also something that teachers were incorporating into, you know, the school day. So people would say to me, well, yeah, but you're just doing the same, aren't you? No, I'm working, and this is what I'm doing with the children that come and do the movement program with me now, with the very, very root of the issue. We're going right back in to the start of life and networking those reflexes from the beginning. Because they will always come back when we're seriously challenged. So can
you give us an example of or if you can just quickly maybe explain what are the developmental steps, movement steps that we take in the first 12 months?
Yeah. Okay, so it's all associated with our vestibular system, which is our balance mechanism that sits behind our ear. And we have fluids there that move, you know, so if I do that, it's sloshed, do that, it's sloshed. And I often have a bottle of coloured water that I show my clients and hold it up to my ear and say, look, what's going on here? And therefore the movement in womb is generating the movement of those fluids and helping the little one to understand where they are in space. Now, if it's a situation where, you know, there isn't a lot of movement allowed, i.e. mum's very stressed, for example, so baby's just like this. Or if there's a multiple pregnancy, I'm a twin, so there's less room to move. Yeah, we're not stimulating our vestibular system, which starts to develop weeks 7 to 9. So it's very early on in the pregnancy. A lot of mums don't even know they're pregnant at that point. The granddaddy reflex, as I refer to it, is the Moro reflex, which is the baby startle reflex. So this is where the baby will expand all limbs and as the head goes back. So it's a startle reflex. I've just done it slowly because there may be people that watch this that have a Moro, like I do. So what that does is it's protecting us. It's a survival reflex because we can't get up and run away in the first 2-3 months of our lives from danger. We can't say, Mum, you know, I'm too hot, I'm too cold, I'm starving, because we don't have the verbal language to do that. So this movement is baby saying, I'm not happy. You know, something is really very wrong. And actually, I'm startled by that. And you can be startled in your eyesight. So I have peripheral vision because I have a Moro. So literally my eyes, you know, go round to here. So I have a much wider visual field. I have a very acute sense of smell. I can tell something's going off before it's gone off. I also have Moroed or in my auditory system. So I hear everything. So I'm constantly filtering out background sound when I'm in conversation and tracking somebody else's conversation. You can have a Moroed skin boundary. So these are the children that have difficulties with textures of certain materials, or waistbands have to be in a certain place on their body, or the seams in their socks, for example. And in all of these situations, you can be hypo, which means it's not working very well, and therefore you're seeking it. So a child that speaks very loudly, or a child that is very noisy, maybe has a hypo system, or somebody that's hyper and is constantly sensory seeking things. Avoiding. Hypo is seeking, avoiding textures, avoiding noises, doesn't like fireworks, doesn't like popping balloons, won't go to the fairground, for example, you know, may have a Moro that's hyper. So the movements are about taking that child back to, you know, 0 days of life and going through those 9 months. So we work with the startle reflex very, very gently. We work with head control. You know, when baby comes out, baby's very curled up. I'm going to come with the baby. This is one of my demos. So when baby is birthed, you know, they're very much like this. You can put a baby on the floor and they will be like this. Yeah. So they need to learn how to unfold.
Yeah.
And the best way to do this is on the floor. You know, we have a culture where we're constantly sitting. Oh, baby's gone out of screen. A baby in something, right? They have to learn how to control this, because this is the heaviest part of their body. And obviously it's only on a neck.
Yeah.
So, you know, I talk a lot about the pinhead, literally, right? So the rest of the body needs to be able to support this structure, right? Via the neck. But if we are constantly keeping our baby's head secure, and they're in a rocker tot, or they're in, you know, car seats and long journeys and constantly in prams and things. Bruce Perry talks about the bucket culture. We sit our kids in a bucket. Yeah, we're not developing proprioceptive feedback and the strength in the neck to control the head. So that means we're quite often out of balance. So working with the Moro reflex, you know, baby on tummy, if baby's on tummy, you know, they will just do that. They have to learn how to do this. And then they push themselves up. They turn and look. So this is all nature's gym program. Yeah. And then from there, they'll push back up into, you know, that all four position. Then they'll start rocking. And then they'll start moving forward with one arm, hand. Oh, and then a knee might come. And then they start crawling. So, and then when they're on their back, you know, it's rolling over. So this is a segmental roll, but also roll over, push up to the side, learn to sit. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Can I just jump in? I know quite a few kids who have so-called skipped the crawling phase. They went from sitting or like shoveling themselves along the floor to walking. Is that a sign of anything?
Yeah. Now, our second born did that, Tom. So just to talk a bit about him, because he's been really prominent in me learning what I need to learn. So Meg went through the developmental movement program just to finish her story, got all her GCSEs, went on to college and got triple distinction, and then qualified in 2020 with a first class honours degree in occupational therapy from Cardiff University.
Wow.
So that was just like, and when we started the program, she was 2.5 years behind in her education and learning. You know, and with that, there's come confidence and self-esteem. You know, the program's very holistic in the way that it's put together anyway, but now I'm working cranially with that as well. It's even more, it's even deeper. So Tom, difficult pregnancy, very difficult birth. He hated being on his front as a baby. You know, absolutely screamed. So I didn't know how to manage that. So he didn't do enough of that. He sat up very quickly. He was 16 weeks when he sat up. And I was just like, oh my God, what are you doing? But from there, he literally, oh, I don't know why my camera's gone off. Hang on a second. Let's just sort that out.
You can still see your lovely face.
There we go. Yeah, from there, he just pulled himself up. And he was a bottom shuffler. He was very effective, you know, one leg like this, scooting across the floor, but he never went into that all four position. Now, if I look back, that makes sense, because the head, you know, he hadn't developed the neck because he hated being on his tummy as a baby. So to come up into that all four position meant the head, you know, really heavy. So that's not comfortable for me, right? So people around me were saying, oh, that's not good, Jack, you need to sort that out, you know. And I was just like, well, you know, what do you do about it? Cross pattern crawling helps the cross-laterality develop in the brain. So we've got the two hemispheres, and between that we have what I call the jam in the sandwich, which is the corpus callosum. Now, if I hear it with this right ear, it goes to the decoding center in the right. But if I hear with the left ear, it goes to the decoding center here, which is a small one, and then has to cross over to come here to be completely decoded. So if I've not done cross pattern crawling, I haven't networked that. That's also relevant for our eyesights and how we see. So it means that we haven't actually developed a network for us to achieve our potential. So, and the way that presented for Tom was that he was totally uncoordinated. His balance was completely off. So every time he lifted his foot to kick a ball, for example, he'd fall over. I mean, there were other issues. He grew very ipsilaterally as well. So one side would grow and then the other side would play catch up. So when the right side had grown and was longer, he would invert his foot to try and shorten his leg. And children do all these things just naturally. You know, the system is a very bright thing, trying to compensate and work out, how do I do this better? So this would mean that he would fall over as well, because he'd trip over his foot. He would refuse to walk any length of distance because his legs would ache. And I think the crutch of it was that if I look back, he was out in the garden, about 3 years old, and Joe, the youngest, was 18 months or so. Joe picked up a full-size rugby ball and kicked that over a 12-foot fence. And Tom stood there and just went, that's not right. I'm 3. I should be able to do that, and I can't do that. Mummy, why can't I do that? He's younger than I am. He shouldn't be able to do that. And I just stood there and I didn't know what to say. I was just like, well, you know, so I went into the patter. Tom, everybody's different. We all have our strengths, you know, so you're really good at this. You know, Joe's obviously great at that. But as I reflect back, there were issues in school, in the school playground, you know, where Tom was behavioural or demonstrative. And I would talk about doing the walk of shame. So, you know, I'd be walking along, coming up to school gates and going, oh God, he stood with the teacher again. That means something's happened. Now I'm going to have to walk through all those parents and go and speak to the teacher. You know, and the playground can be quite a hostile place, as you probably understand too. All mothers can feel this at times. So it's just like, oh my gosh. And it will be, Mrs. Ellis, you know, we've had an altercation today. So Tom had to take some time out. He hurt another child. I've spoken to that child's parent. I'm just like, what's going on? I don't understand. So we get back into the car and I'm like, Tom, you know, what's happened? And it's just like, well, he wouldn't do this, or he annoyed me, or, oh, right. Okay. But we don't, you know, we don't hit people. We don't, you know, so I was just like, oh my God. So the long, tall and the short of that is that he was born on the same day as a lady that I was friendly with. So the two boys effectively grew up together and they were very, very similar. And this lad was coming over to play, and Tom had been doing the movement program. And I could see, you know, how his coordination, his balance was all really much better. So, and he was starting to play football. I think he was about 10. I said, oh, you know, your friend's coming over. We're going to get in the park, but don't take the football because you know that he doesn't like playing with that either. And Tom just looked at me and said, no, I'm going to take the football, Mum, because there might be other mates down there that I can play football with. You know, I'll still play, you know, shooting sticks and things, you know, with my friend. So we go down to the park and Mum and I are chatting as we're having a coffee. And, you know, Tom's playing with his friend, but then other kids turn up. So he gets the football out and he's kicking that around. And his friend's still playing with, you know, sticks, shooting behind trees and things, playing army games. So then they come back for an ice cream. And Mum had already said, my God, what have you been doing with Tom? He's just a completely different child. So I was talking to her about the programme. So the two boys sat down and, you know, had their drink and their ice cream. And I was just earwigging because I heard Tom turn to his friend and said, you need your mum to talk to my mum about the programme that I've done. Because you need to do the programme. Because you are exactly like I was before I did the programme. And he said, you don't like the football, do you? So his friend goes, no, God, because it's hard. And, you know, I can't get out of the way of it fast enough. I don't know what to do with it when it's coming to me. And it hurts when it hits me. And Tom's like, well, I was exactly the same. He said, but, you know, now, because I've done all this movement thing, you know, I love it. And I'm playing for a team and everything. And he said, you know, when I was at school, I used to go out in the playground and I'd want everybody to play my game. So I'd have to get out there quick. I'd have to be out there first. So I just went, oh, that's interesting, Tom. I said, so what happened when they wouldn't play your game or you were late? He said, well, I'd try and play their game. He said, but I looked stupid because I couldn't do it.
Mm.
And it made me really cross. And I get angry. And then they start teasing me because I look funny. So I'd end up hitting them.
Mm.
Ah, hence the walk of shame. That was what was going on.
Wow.
So it's like, oh, you know, so he went on to be a very good swimmer. He played football in a team at latter years 5 and 6 at primary school for Carl Town.
Mm.
Then he moved to Chippenham and played football over here. But as soon as he went to senior school, he started playing rugby and loved that. So this is a boy that couldn't catch anything, couldn't kick anything, let alone run and do those things. And he ended up being selected for the Dorset and Wilts County squad, under 15s, under 16s, and a black belt in Taekwondo at the age of 13,
Wow.
14.
What a transformation.
Totally,
wow.
Katerina, which is why I totally believe in the work that I do. And this is what I see from a transformation perspective in the children that I work with. You know, yes, the program takes 12 to 18 months. And it is an investment, you know, it's a commitment. It's a commitment for the child to be there every day to do the 15 minutes of movement, and a commitment for the parent to be there to support them in a grounded way. But the changes can be absolutely radical. You know, I mean, I've had children sit here and go, the world's really different now, Jacqui. It feels really different. Or I can trust myself now. I couldn't trust myself before. Or I really enjoy reading. And this is a child, I mean, you know, Meg loves reading now, but she didn't read her first book until she was 10 and a half. And then that was 92 pages in one night. It was like it all just went click. And she came downstairs and she went, I've read this. It was at 10:30 on a Sunday evening. And I just looked at her and I said, really? You know, because ever the cynic and the curious. I just went, oh, okay, well, right, you better come and sit down. So I scan read it very quickly because the print was quite big, and asked her, I said, I'm going to ask you some questions here. And she answered every single one of them. I just went, blinking Henry, you did actually read that. You know, and her writing changed. I mean, Tom's writing was dreadful because he didn't have that fine motor skill either. I mean, it was huge. It was like a spider had walked across the page. You know, his writing is so neat now. So, yeah, so cross-pattern crawling is a really big key to unlock a lot of stuff, you know. And as a practitioner with the program, I always make sure that the children that I work with spend time doing that stage, because it's like the final sign-off of everything and pulling it all together. Which is really important. But yeah, I mean, children, the ones that are struggling with reading and writing, that's a lot of the time down to what we call the asymmetrical tonic neck, which is where the hand is totally in line and fixed in movement with the head. So if the head does that, the hand does that. Yeah. So obviously this is all about postural adjustment. So what happens when we're writing is we start on the page here, and then as we do that, and you'll see it in children as they're reading. So, you know, if you're curious about your child, just watch them to read a book. And if they're going like this, they've probably got an ATNR, because their eyes can only read by fixating on something. So there's an immaturity in their ocular motor function where they haven't networked all the muscles around their eyes. And it's difficult for them to track. Look over there, go across their midline, look over there, and follow an object. And that was Meg's biggest issue. You know, well, her Mori was a big one as well. But yeah, you know, it was really difficult because as you're doing that, the brain's thinking, oh, I'm going to fall off the chair. I'm going to, you know, so these are the kids that are shuffling the whole time. You know, we also have kids that sit with their feet wrapped around the chairs of legs of chairs, or kneel. They can only sit when they're kneeling on the, you know, kneeling on the bottom on the chair, or they've got one leg underneath their bottom. And what they're doing is they're fixing their body. You know, the brain's going, oh, that's going to move. So you need to keep it still in order to do this. So yeah, I mean, you know, humans, we're amazing.
Yeah.
You know, if we can't do something, we'll figure out a way as to how we can. 9 times out of 10. And this is what the children are doing. There are approximately, well, to be fair, that was back when I was doing my training, so I you know, haven't done much analysis or observation in classroom, but usually a third of children have retained reflexes.
That's a large proportion.
It is. Yeah. You know, and then if you go back to the birth, so Meg was a Von Two's birth, which also links to a immature asymmetrical tonic neck reflex.
Okay.
Because I'm just going to bring the baby in and the pelvis. So heads up to everybody, just make sure you're grounded. So we are the only mammal, let's get this on screen, that has to do a turn.
Yeah.
Oh, hang on a second. Here we go. You know, we can't come out that way. We've got to turn that way.
To come through, yeah.
Yeah. So it's thought that the AT&R helps that process. So if that's immature, that's one of the key indicators that I look for on the form. You know, cesarean birth, assisted birth, forceps, Von Twos, there's probably a retained AT&R because they haven't been able to do that movement and turn and come through.
Wow.
Yeah.
Powerful stuff. Wow, I could talk to you for hours, Jacqui. There's so much to delve into, but I thought we'll probably bring our conversation to a close. Is there any advice you'd want to share with parents who are now maybe thinking, oh, I'm picking this up about my child? Any advice you'd share with them at this point?
Curiosity and observation are very powerful. You know, so press your pause button when something's happening and just quietly observe it. And as you do that, you will start to see patterns of behavior. That's going to give you really important information. It might also help you as a parent to orientate to certain situations differently with that information as well. Always be curious. You know, our children's behavior is a way of them communicating. And it's communicating very early experiences that they have no language for, because those experiences were pre-verbal. You know, so a child that's having difficulty getting out of the house in the morning, maybe if you look back at the birth process, they had difficulty coming into the world. So when we can come into our heart space because we make that connection and we have that recognition, we can look at it from a different perspective. Children don't do things to wind us up.
Yeah, totally.
They do things to communicate to us, and sometimes they can only do that through behavior.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And if people, you know, if parents start seeing things, have concerns and go, oh, and resonating with some of the things that I've said, please drop me a line by email with your contact information and let's have a chat.
Wonderful. Yeah, very much resonated for me. The focus of the behavior as a way of communicating is geared towards the emotion, so the emotional needs. So that's kind of my area. So yours is the yours is the early life, you know, coming into the world, and then I pick up when they're already when they're already here. Wonderful. Oh, this has been such a pleasure. I've learned so much, Jacqui. You know, just well of information for all the parents to start thinking about, noticing about their children and observing if something doesn't feel right. Absolutely. So thank you so much for your time, and all the best with your work, and let's build this new world.
Absolutely. No, thank you. Really appreciate and grateful for you to ask me to come on here and talk about what I do, Katerina, because as you know, pleasure. I'm more than happy to do that. I'm standing on my soapbox. So thank you for your time too and the invite.
My pleasure. Okay. Thank you, everyone. See you next time. Okay.